Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Bluegrass State, as Kentucky Speedway is the fifth venue of the fourth season of the Dark Horse Racing Series DW12 cars. We're getting set for 120 laps under the lights here at this 1.5-mile D-shaped speedway. And we have a pretty action-packed field here tonight as well, as several of them out on the track, beginning or completing their qualifying laps for this evening's main event. I'm Seth Cole alongside of Scott Rankin. And Scott, I'm just going to throw a couple of numbers at you here real quickly that I noticed coming into this race. Kentucky's been a mainstay on the schedule, but in the last two times we visited here, the pole sitter has gone on to win the race. So with that being said, how much stress, how much emphasis do you think is being put on qualifying here tonight?
Well, Seth, what you've just said is indeed a lot of numbers. And you know what they mean? They mean precisely nothing. I mean, it's Kentucky. Like, put it this way. Look, I mean, I think it's just luck. Would it happen to have been Robert Molesca the third that won the last one?
It would indeed.
So what that tells me is more than likely it's a fuel race, because the one guy on the grid that has been the best at managing fuel so far this season has been Robert Molesca the third. So, look, we were talking to a few of the drivers in the pre-broadcast, and they said, look, fuel is going to be an issue. We're looking at 35 laps-ish. So you've got to make up 5 laps per stint somewhere, and that's per stint. So that's 15 over the duration of the race. I think this is going to be such a fuel-intensive race. It's doable. It is very, very doable. Is it quicker than the 4-stop race? I don't think it is. I think the 4-stop race is going to be actually quicker. Sorry, is it 3? No, yeah, it's 3 stops. Sorry, my apologies. 3-stop race is actually going to be quicker than the 2-stop. So, look, I mean, there's going to be altering opinions right up and down the field tonight, and I think caution's going to play a factor here.
And of course, too, we were told that tire wear isn't going to be that much of a factor here tonight. So kind of piggybacking off your point there, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to do a 4-stop rather than a 3-stop, because more than likely you're not going to gain much in terms of lap times, because the tires don't wear all that much, even on the long run.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you know, you're going to see little to no fall off. Like I said, I think you're going to see multiple guys here. No one's going to want to lead in the early phases of the race, but somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to sacrifice their fuel window. Now, how hard that person pushes. Ultimately, if they can't get enough fuel saving done in the first 10 laps of the first stint, they immediately flip over onto the alternative fuel strategy, and they have to go. That's going to be the kicker. As soon as that person starts to go, that starts to throw everyone's fuel numbers around a little bit, because they need to keep that draft. They've got to stick with that lead guy. But they also need to save the fuel. That's what you've got to commit. And the worst possible thing you can try and do in a fuel-saving race is drive down the middle line. You cannot sit there and go, I'm going to give myself options in a race that's this finely poised in terms of fuel strategy. You have to go in either direction. You cannot just go, yep, I'm going to save enough fuel, and the lead guy's going, and I need to increase my pace a little bit. That's, you're dead in terms of fuel, 100%. So I think somebody's just going to have to pick a lap number. They've saved enough fuel that they can extend their stint 1 or 2 extra laps, and then they're just going to go.
Like Gale Brooks going to be the last driver to go out there and try and set a time. I think Gale might have hit the apron there, which might have actually wiped away the lap time he was setting. So it looks like out of the 20 drivers that are going to be taking the green flag here tonight, only 16 of them, 17, are going to be taking time here this evening. As you can see on the left side of your screen, though, Robert Molesca III going to go back-to-back seasons where he will sit on the pole position. Last year led 63 laps of the Kentucky race and went on to pick up the victory. At that point, it was only his 5th win on the season. He would go on to win 5 more during the course of Season 3 en route to his championship.
And look, I mean, the guy, he's had a couple strong weeks now back-to-back as well, so he's really thrown himself right up there in terms of contention. I mean, we saw quite a few late race cautions last week and incidents happening right up and down the pack, and Nick DeGroot really threw himself out there and said, hey, I want to take it to Robert Molesca, but in order for me to do that, I have to get away. I have to get these overtakes done. He got a little bit too aggressive, and unfortunately that caused chaos right up and down the field. Is he going to come out tonight and be aggressive? Is he going to be the guy that says, I'm going to push this pack? I'm going to drive them off of their fuel numbers? Could it be Nick de Groot that's the really deciding factor of this race?
Well, I'll tell you what. Remember, you asked me if Maleska was the guy that did the coast to coast last season. I said yes. Well, the guy that did the coast to coast pull to win back in season 2 was the guy you just mentioned, Nick de Groot. So we could end up seeing the rivalry that took place last week at Chicagoland rekindle again here tonight at yet another mile and a half.
Yeah, I mean, there's options, man. I mean, we saw how strong he was at Chicagoland. That was a phenomenal race right up until those last stages. We had fuel strategies, we had pit strategies. It was all presented. And that's what I want from this series, and that's what we've seen so far. If you were to sit down and say, hey, Scott, what more do you want from a series? I can't. Dark Horse has provided it so far. Look, I mean, tonight there's options. Who's going to win it? I can't tell you that. I honest to God, cannot tell you who I think is going to win this race because I don't know.
Maleska III is going to line up alongside of Henry Bennett for this race. So your top 2 in the point standings start top 2 in this evening's festivities. Bennett comes into this race a total of 23 points behind Maleska III coming into tonight's event. As we take a look at the starting grid here tonight, presented by LMCgear.com. Wagner in 3rd, Eric Peterson up there in 4th, Nick de Groot, former winner of this race, back in 5th, with Jimmy Drynan completing the 3rd row. Bronson Stafford's been really good this season. Had a little bit of a struggle last week at Chicagoland, getting caught up in a late race wreck, dropped to 4th in points, but he's been on a bit of a tear. And Rick Ravon, you're going to see here actually starting back in the 11th position. Remember, we saw him work his way to the front last week at Chicagoland. I think he qualified 12th for that race, so not exactly the best in qualifying, it seems, but once we get into long runs, he seems to improve, get better and better, faster and faster, and eventually move up there into the top 5, usually up into the top 3.
Yeah, and I really feel like that's where Rick Ravon's strength is. I will say to our viewers that this league is a fixed setup league, so the drivers aren't putting together a lot of work to try and get their cars out here each week. They don't have to spend hours and hours coming up with the best setup, which is one of the benefits of a fixed setup. However, qualifying presents itself with an alternative setup. During practice, the drivers only have access to the race setup. They don't actually get the qualifying setup. So that means that if they want to set a good qualifying time, they have to spend time through the week practicing on that qualifying setup, which is an alternative setup. The car handles differently. It's a lot grippier. It's a lot more. You can do different things with it. You can create pace in different ways. So Rick Ravon clearly is focused on the race, and it's worked for him so far.
And the race is green as we're underway here at Kentucky Speedway. 120 laps await these drivers and an opportunity at victory lane. Maleska III, who's been there 3 times already in the first 4 races, leads them onto the back straightaway, but Henry Bennett charges to drivers left.
Yeah, we'll see if he can really make a stamp on everything so far.
Over there in 3 and 4, big thing that we were told is do not clip that apron. There's no grip down there, and it's going to send you around. Another thing that we were also told, and this has been something we've heard mostly at the 1.5-mile, 2-mile speedways all season long, and that's the fact that if we do go into a long green flag run, as that fuel tank starts to empty, the back of the car is going to get lighter. So these drivers right now, the car is pretty firmly planted. Longer we go into a run, the more spin happy those cars are going to want to be, and they're going to be fighting those race cars while racing double wide, and as we see on some occasions here in the field, 3 wide.
Yeah, and the other thing to consider is when a car starts behaving like that, it generally tends to create more cautions and things, which makes the drivers want to run as long as they possibly can on that first green flag run. So that's something that the drivers are going to be aware of. We want to make sure this first green flag run goes as long as possible, because if that caution happens, all of a sudden, if we don't do that, we're a lap down on fuel. It's just not good enough.
Oh, this is interesting. I'm almost seeing some deja vu from last week to this week. Remember last week, Maleska III led us to the green. We saw him after the first couple laps, mired back outside the top 5. It's happened again. He's back in the 6th position as Jimmy Drynan and Nick de Groot battle for the top spot.
Yeah, I'm really not all that surprised. I think that's planned from Robert Maleska. He knows his fuel numbers, he knows where he needs to be, and he's driving to those numbers. So hopefully he can save a little bit of excess fuel, and we'll start to see him push a little bit later on.
Mention the fact that back in Season 3, Maleska III led 63 of the 120 laps. Nick de Groot In the race he won back in Season 2, he led 113 of the 120 laps, so a dominating performance him 2 seasons ago. Jimmy Dryden, though, got him at the start-finish line and will clear him going into Turn 1. DeGroot falls back to second, and Eric Peterson now going to come up into the third position.
So again, I really don't expect to see this much sort of jostling for position early. These are drivers just trying to organize themselves, just trying to set themselves up for the back end of the race. They want to get there with a clean car. They want to have that fast repair still up their sleeve, just in case something happens.
On board here with Henry Bennett, you can see Eric Peterson's car dancing around a little bit there, going into Turn 1. As we look behind to Robert Mileska III, running in the 5th position. Got some moves back there on the back straightaway. I think there was a block being thrown there. I think it's Bronson Stafford, Jim Brooks in that vicinity around the 8th position.
It'll be interesting to see if they continue to do that. I'm trying to keep my eyes peeled for Bronson Stafford at this point in time. I really want to see what he's going to do, if he's going to push on forward, if he's just going to be happy to let ride in these early phases of the race. Because you've got to remember, like I said, long race here, many fuel stops. You can outplay somebody in these fuel windows. So all of this jostling for position is purely theoretical at this point in time.
Well, it was almost 3 wide there with Bronson Stafford, Jim Brooks, and I think it was Charles Teed that was on the inside of the 3-wide formation. They settled that out as Mileska III jumps to the outside of Teed for 6th place. Henry Bennett just up ahead of them, and now Jimmy Dryden back to the inside of Nick DeGroot. One thing that we're going to be talking a lot about here tonight is aero. Look right there as Jimmy Dryden, he doesn't push up the track. He's purposely going up there because you can actually get a run to be able to make a crossover on the high side of 4 onto the front straightaway. The lead car will purposely try and move up there, clear themselves across the nose of the second place machine to try and stall them out, to try and avoid having them have that run on the front straightaway and have the inside advantage going into Turn 1.
Alternatively, what they're actually... So, yeah, it's about taking away that air to the front nose of the car, because what you want to do is make sure that they have to lift off further in the corner to ensure that when they come down the front stretch, they are only dropped. So, optionally, there is the ability, if they don't do it correctly, that the car on the high side actually gets a larger run, because they've now got a little bit of momentum up their sleeve. They've now got the draft up their sleeve. They can get that run and get around. Again, like I said, a lot of this sort of stuff that's happening, this is just the guys sort of figuring each other out. Right now, they're not racing each other, so to speak. They're actually just deciding who should be leading, who's, fuel saving more, who's really sitting in that draft. They're learning how to race each other in and around the track, because the air package, they don't get the option to practice a heap of that running in the draft pack earlier on in the week.
I'll tell you what, if this is how nervous I'm feeling with them feeling each other out, I can't imagine how scared I'm going to be when they actually start racing each other. You've got about 13 cars up in this lead pack from DeGroot back to Jim Herrick. It's about 2 seconds back to some stragglers. Eric Schaus, Dylan Moskowitz, Jeff Heisong, Gary Corley, and others. Are these guys that are maybe in a little bit more fuel conservation mode than these guys up here at the front?
Potentially. It's a bit tough to say, because if I'm looking at Eric Schaus might have the option to actually still stay on the draft just barely, but he's got to push on now. If he's in fuel conservation mode and he loses this draft and then he's leading this backpack, all of a sudden everyone that's in this backpack, they lose the ability to fuel save, right? So he has to push himself back up onto this pack, or else that entire rear of the pack setup isn't going to work.
We mentioned that Rick Ravon didn't exactly have the best of qualifying efforts. He didn't let that stop him, up 10 spots since the start of this race and to the race lead. Nick DeGroot trying to get alongside him on the top of Turn 4 onto the front straightaway. The two of them will drag race the start-finish line, and about half a car length will be advantage Nick DeGroot. He'll take the lead going into Turn 1. Now, obviously, at this point in time, we've had some great racing, but as I said, it's kind of making me nervous just how close these guys are getting to each other. We have had a total of 11 cautions in the last 2 races at Kentucky. 5 back in Season 2, 6 back in Season 3. But based off of the long green flag runs we've had at other mile-and-a-half tracks here this past season already, back to last week at Chicagoland, we ended up only having a couple of late race yellows take place in that one. we could be in for a long green flag run, several long green flag runs in this one. I'm not certain we're going to see the caution that many times here tonight.
I think we will. I think you've hit the nail on the head, really, there in terms of cautions. I actually rate it a lot lower in terms of caution percentages. Like you said, though, it's when that fuel balance comes out of the rear of the car, the fuel tanks in these cars are towards the rear. What that means is that when you've got fuel and you've got all that extra weight sitting on the rear end of the car, as that fuel weight burns off, all of a sudden the weight balance of the car shifts forward. And it's not for the reason you might think, oh, the car's lighter, that means naturally the balance. No. You've got a huge fuel tank that's sitting over that rear axle, and it's pushing a lot of that weight down on the rear axle, generates a little bit more grip, makes the car a little bit heavier, means you can't run quite as fast. When that weight burns off a little bit, that weight balance shifts towards the front of the car. There's less grip at the rear of the car. That's what you were talking about earlier on in the piece, that these guys might get a little bit unstable. If we're going to see a caution, earlier on in these runs, like you said, the cars are planted. They've got a lot of that weight over the rear axle. Fuel sloshing about. It's not shifting too much. The cars are really comfortable at that point. It's the light fuel runs that they're really not all that comfortable. They get a little bit twitchy. And how close this racing is tonight, I think we are due for a caution right around the pit stop windows.
Yeah, and a big reason why that could be is two of the factors we talked about already. The back end of the car is going to get light as less and less fuel is in the tank, and that apron is awfully slick. They're going to have to use that apron in order to get down to the access road and the entrance to pit lane, so could very well be a driver spinning out trying to get onto pit road that might bring out that first yellow.
The one benefit of pit road is that it's actually not considered part of the racing surface, so they're less likely to trigger a caution down there. But look, I mean, it still can happen, especially if the entry to pit road gets blocked. That's tends to be the time that iRacing will automatically throw a yellow in those sorts of circumstances. The other factor that's causing a caution and giving me an issue, like you said, it is that apron. But I'm not really necessarily directly considering the effects of the apron. I'm considering the effects of the cars lifting and then having to get back into the gas. The way that the differentials work in race cars is that they want to be on the power to really turn the car and settle the car down on power. When you roll out of the gas, you shift again, it's another one of those things where you're shifting the weight off of the rear wheels. Whilst you're in the throttle, all of that weight gets shifted to the back through G-forces, through that build-up of momentum. When you accelerate, let's talk a few laws of physics here. Weight at rest doesn't want to move. Whilst it's at rest, it's going to stay bog standard. The instant that you start to move, the weight's still trying to stay sitting still, which is why all that weight gets shifted towards the rear end of the car. As they come off the throttle, again, the car wants to go fast still. It's still trying to go fast. So that weight shifts towards the nose, again unsettling the car, and with the combination of the lighter fuel loads and that effect of having to lift out of the gas, that's where I think we see the unsteadiness, and especially with the pack racing format that we're seeing tonight, I think is going to be a real tricky period for these drivers to navigate.
Well, when we ended up seeing Maleska III drop back last week at Chicagoland, took him 20 laps to work his way back up to the front. Took him 5 laps longer here at Kentucky, but he is now back up leading this race. Nick DeGroot going to try and battle back to the inside for the top position here through 3 and 4, but I'm starting to notice a little bit of cat and mouse games going on here as well. Maleska dropped back, moved to the front. On the flip side, Rick Ravon, who was out in front for a good portion of this, saw him dive to the apron on the back straightaway, letting a number of drivers on by so that way he can get the benefit of some draft, not be the one that's using up the most fuel, cutting the clean air for the drivers behind him.
Yeah, and I think he's also trying to read a lot of what's going on back in there in the pack and know that he can get through, and he knows how to settle the car down and make all those overtakes. I mean, he's already done it from P12 up to the lead, so he's just testing himself again. He's making sure that everything that he's been working on this week in terms of the practice and where to run and how the car's handling, and he's putting that theory to the test as he sends it to the inside of Maleska.
They go 3 wide potentially there as DeGroot tried to go a little bit lower, and caution is out. Mike Tellier in the 97, I believe, has run into an issue.
I tell you what a time for Ravon to go to the lead.
And this was only, 7 laps or so potentially away from when we were going to see these drivers have to start thinking about making their first trip to pit road under green flag conditions. Now they're going to be able to come down under pacing.
Yeah, so this will be a guarantee, and a lot of these guys... There's an option to not take tires here if you're looking for a little bit of track position, excuse me. but I would be taking tires. It's just something you don't want to have to risk, especially as that fuel load burns light. It's when the tires are going to be their oldest, so I expect everyone to come down, everyone to take tires. We're not limited in terms of tire sets, and the tires are a little bit fractionally longer than the fuel, I believe, to fill. So look, I mean, it's a no-brainer.
You saw there Mike Tellier getting loose off of turn 2. It's hard. I think he might have clipped the apron there through the center of 1 and 2. It got him loose, and then he spent most of turn 2 trying to gather it back up. Finally just overcorrected a little too much to the left, and that thing just snapped around. Now, granted, more than likely, the emptying fuel tank, the lightness on the back end of the car probably played a big factor into the fact that that thing snapped around as well.
Look, I just had a watch of it back. Yeah, he's clipped the apron just barely. Just one wheel on the apron in the middle of 1 and 2. That's all it took, was just unsettle the car. He wiggled it up the track. He's actually, whilst the car's spinning, he's got so much opposite lock-in trying to catch the thing back up and get it, turning normally, and it just didn't happen for him. So that's a tough showing, especially Tellier was up at the lead towards the tail end of last week's race. Had an option to win the race, and then unfortunately that contact with Nick de Groot came through, and him and Bronson Stafford both went from being, quite successful in Chicagoland to running towards the back. It's heartbreaking, and for him to come out in the very next week and be in this sort of a position, it's not good for his season.
Well, he is going to be able to use the faster pair given to these drivers. They only have one. The problem is he had to teleport the car back to pit road, could not make it back to pit lane under its own power, and so far has lost 2 laps here under pacing. So it's going to be a bit of a long road for him to get back onto the lead lap and back into contention, despite the fact that he will have a car back up to 100% once he is able to take that faster pair on. Everyone was on pit lane. Rick Ravon wins the battle off pit road, will remain the leader over Maleska III, Nick de Groot, Henry Bennett, and Charles Teed. While we got the moment here, want to let you know that our starting lineup and our results here are brought to you by lmcgear.com. It's your one-stop shop for all your motorcycle, camping, and backpacking needs, specializing in camping gear that is ultra lightweight and compact, making it perfect for carrying on your motorcycle or in a backpack. And they also carry all the motorcycle accessories that you need to get your gear and safely down the road. Check out lightweightmotorcyclecampinggear.com today, and be sure to use the promo codes that are available now. You can enter in Dark Horse 10 for 10% off all Dark Horse Racing League for members and fans, and also use code AREA10 for 10% off for all Area 51 League members and fans. So head on over to lightweightmotorcyclegear.com today.
So just having a quick look back, we have a couple of takers that come down pit road under that last caution. Under the last laps of the current caution. So we actually had, I believe, Matt Rodriguez and Jimmy Drynan both came back down pit road one extra time. So they've taken an extra lap around to add some extra fuel to their cars. There's an option here for these guys to run that little bit longer in terms of fuel. Could that potentially play out and play them back into contention? Who knows?
We'll have to find out as the green flag back in the air with 90 laps remaining. So at least 2 more pit stops on the horizon for these drivers. Question is, will it be under green or under caution? And things much more spread out than they were at the initial start of this race as well. Started this race with double file. The single file spreads these guys out in a big line. And so we're going to have little battles here and there, I think. I don't know if necessarily they'll all draft back up in one big pack on this run.
I'm actually just having a look. There's already 3 distinct packs starting to form. So you've got everyone from Rick Ravon down to Charles Teed. They're in the primary pack. And then Jim Brooks back. You've got all of these cars sort of queuing up to try and get around Jim Brooks. Bronson Stafford's going to complete that pass. The 77 of Benjamin Combs is down on the inside. So I think Stafford's going to try and push this pack back up to the leaders. Then this sort of tails back off down to Matt Wagner. And then Eric Peterson is the lead car in the next group.
Also got Dylan Moskowitz there in that bright yellow machine. The bright green behind him is Eric Schaus in the 72. Jeff Heisong, Jim Herrick back in this group as well. Looks like that second group led by Bronson Stafford, like they might be able to latch on to the slipstream of Henry Bennett and have 10 cars up in this lead pack, but for right at the moment, we've got 5 cars chasing 5 cars, and Nick DeGroot leading the lead pack down the back straightaway.
Yeah, I think Nick DeGroot's actually going to push this pack along. He does not want the next 5 trailing cars to get together, work together, and find their way back up. Jim Brooks is actually going to get cycled all the way out to the outside lane. They were 3 wide for multiple periods then. Let's talk about Paulo Hernandez, though. This is a guy who has gotten unlucky just about every week of the season, with the exception of Road America. The guy's put in some phenomenal performances. He's been right there, I think, in terms of the equation of Maleska III, except for Maleska III had a horrible Road America and has been good everywhere else. For Paulo Hernandez, it's been the other way around. The guy's been such a good recruit to this league. I think he's got potential. He just needs to stick it together. It's a bit like my racing career. Everything's good, you're really quick, you get to the last laps, and something goes wrong, you don't quite get there.
Yeah, what was it last week at Chicago? I think he was up inside the top 5 pretty much the entirety of the race and got hit with a speeding penalty late and was never able to really come back from that. So yeah, right now running in the 10th position. We'll see if he can work his way up here. Paulo Hernandez so far this season, 10th in the overall standings, only 1 top 10. That was a top 5 finish in the first 4 races. He'll try and take it 3 wide there with Benjamin Combs and Jim Brooks, but neither lane really gained an advantage through that corner. Up at the front, though, still side by side, Nick DeGroot and Rick Ravon. They can't decide who wants to lead this race, but it's more a case that they get such a run, they can't afford to back off and let that driver in front stay in front. They've got to take that momentum somewhere.
And the other problem with backing off is that it allows the cars behind to all of a sudden get a run on you, because you've got that momentum, then you have to lose that momentum to let the guy in front sort of settle back in. The other thing to note right now is that all of a sudden this race is no longer a fuel-saving race. That caution happening when it did, it's 28 laps, was when the drivers came down pit road. That means that all of a sudden 35-35, that's, kind of can't get to the end now without guaranteeing another sort of 2 stops. So we're guaranteed to see a 3-stop race if this goes green now.
I'll tell you, one guy to keep an eye on is the 3rd place running machine right there, Charles Teed. Now, he's only made 3 of the first 4 races. He did not start at Road America, but in the last 2 weeks, he has climbed 12 spots in the standings, from 25th to now 13th, gained 4 spots after last week at Chicagoland. He's 107 points out, but another solid outing for him here today. Been a long time since Charles Teed's gone to Victory Lane. That was last season at Iowa, the last time that he visited Victory Lane.
Yeah, so what that says to me is obviously not a big fan of the road courses, and he's a short track specialist. I mean, he didn't do all that badly last week at Chicagoland. I think he finished top 5, top 6 from off the top of my head. I'd have to look that up. But he's got an option. I mean, he's definitely performed. He was, right there in terms of pole? I think Robert Maleska pipped him by 1/1000th last week for the pole. So, look, I mean, the guy's definitely showed some speed. He showed some skill. He just needs a little bit more luck.
And we had that group of 5 back there, from 6th back to 10th, that were trying to reel in the lead group. A couple of them have been successful. Matt Wagner and Bronson Stafford have now latched onto the tail end of this top 5, but Combs, Hernandez, and Jim Brooks, they were not able to follow these 2 up there. So it looks like it's going to be a pack of 7 now, from Rick Ravon back to Bronson Stafford.
Yeah, I think that's just that's smart driving from both Wagner and Bronson Stafford. If you actually watch their progress back up towards the lead pack as well, Wagner sort of led them away, and Bronson sort of just was, there's no reason to try and overtake Wagner at this point in the race. It's really going to work against me. What I really need to do is just make sure that I'm sitting here, I'm not challenging him, I'm not forcing him to take different lines, I'm not forcing him to lose momentum. I want him to run the fastest laps he possibly can, because if he does that, we're going to be right there.
Charles Teed to the point for the first time here tonight. Rick Ravon to the outside, Nick DeGroot to the inside. It'll be DeGroot getting the advantage going into turn 3. Update on Mike Tellier. He has returned back to the racetrack, albeit 2 laps down. Did use his faster pair, but he's going to need a little bit of luck here to be able to get back onto the lead lap to get back into contention. As so far, we have run 45 laps and only seen 1 caution so far in this event. Closing in on the halfway point, and about halfway through a fuel run as well. A thing that I was also told was the 35 laps we were given is in single car runs. There's going to be a little bit of a difference when you're running in draft, but not that much. It's almost guaranteed you're not going to be... Oh, Henry Bennett with a save. Rick Ravon up into the wall. No caution yet. There's another car out of shape up ahead. That was Maleska the third, who I think got down on the apron. He was slideways, and he hangs onto it.
Oh, how was there only 2 cars that got caught up in that with racing like that? Bennett's still losing it. Would this trigger a caution?
It's on the racing surface, and yes, caution will come out.
That's Rick Ravon. That's Rick Ravon played back into it.
He got a pretty good shot into the outside wall, did Rick Ravon. I mean,
He's got a tire off the ground.
That was a wreck that took about maybe 3 extra corners than it should have to take place. There you see, there's the suspension you're talking about. Yeah, that right front's not even hitting the ground. Suspended up in the air. There's Bennett going on by him. I mean, there were about 4 or 5 cars that were out of shape. Bennett was losing it. Ravon was into the wall. Maleska was in the middle 3 wide sideways. It's amazing that we ended up getting away with literally just 1 car spun out, and that took place 3 corners after Bennett was sideways over in turn 1.
And the only reason that happened was Bennett is trying to get down to pit road. He's trying to get the car locked down and see what he can do to get the car back to pit road and sort of build his race. And he touches the apron and the car just loses it. There's nothing he can do. He locks it down. It saves Rick Ravon and himself, though. Absolutely saves them, because Ravon was on his way to pit road as well. Caution flag comes out. He's got enough time to get back out on the racing surface and get back around to the tail end of the pack before making it to pit road.
Tremendous job of not hitting anything with that slide for Henry Bennett. Now, obviously, we're going to be taking some closer onboard cameras, but just from the initial look there, Scott, might have been a little gap whack that took place there, or was there contact from the back end of the 2 and the front end of the 07? I'm not certain.
I haven't had a look at it yet. I'm actually just going back to check it out now. This is going to be a difficult one to sort of pick up, because Ravon's right there with him. Who's that on the outside? Charles Teed. So Teed's obviously lost the benefit of the draft. He's a long way back in terms of momentum. Maybe? I mean, this is so tough to call, because there is a little bit of a gap. But I think they would have made contact. The gap is so small, it's less than a foot. They would have made contact no matter what, because Ravon's trying to get down behind. No, there was contact. There was actual contact. The cars are so close together that you would not fit a banana in between them if we're going to use that as our measuring stick. You know what? Banana measuring stick. Gap whack and banana measuring sticks. It's all what it's all about over here at Flatout Racing Network.
FRN, coining new phrases every day. Now, I was going to ask the question, but it's actually rhetorical now, because I just noticed that Rick Ravon did take on the faster pair there. I wasn't certain if that hit into the outside wall was going to...
Hang on. Charles Teed actually gets into the back of Ravon as a part of that. So Ravon may have taken on... Yeah, Ravon's got massive damage to his nose cone. He may have gotten away. They may have been able to replace his wing. So Ravon may be okay. Sorry, not Ravon. Teed. Teed may be okay.
Now, he did not take on a faster pair to Charles Teed. He'll be restarting in the 4th position.
He's got new wings, so he's actually fine. He's survived. Barely. Oh, man. Races change on a dime, don't they?
It has. It definitely has, especially when you consider the fact now that these drivers have all come down pit lane yet again. And so, theoretically, these drivers should be able to make it the rest of the way. Well, it could just be a one-stop race, because if you take the 70 split in half, you got yourself the 35 stints that we've been told about.
Yeah, and I mean, that's based upon hot running numbers too, so I think that means that the guys from here, I have this expectation, if you keep your eyes on Maleska the third, what he's been doing at the start end of all of these races is just sort of watching the pack, sitting back, settling in behind them. I think he's still got a fuel number that he wants to drive to. I think he still wants to save enough. Now, the reason that I say that is because he's going to try and run 1 to 2 laps longer than everyone else ahead of him, and those laps are going to be at full tilt. He wants to run those laps to the point where he makes up half a second on everybody else. Where they're in fuel save mode, they're struggling to get to pit road. Maleska III is going to just go as hard and as fast as he can for as long as he can once everybody else pits. That's why he's falling back in the early stages of the pack. If you watch the way that he's driving as well, he's not contesting the lead until he's about 10 to 15 laps into a run. At that point, he starts to contest it. Why is he doing that? Because he's saved enough fuel, he can start to push ahead a little bit.
This is interesting. Going through the field here, taking a look at the dashes of respective drivers, and a number of them, Nick DeGroot, Charles Teed, Eric Schaus, all those guys, currently running in 6th gear. I'm assuming that they're coasting, shutting off the engine a little bit, saving some fuel. I noticed that Robert Maleska III, however, he's running his car in 1st gear.
Or how that works is that the lower RPMs burn less fuel, and it takes less fuel to accelerate. The car just sort of wants to idle forwards at a reasonable rate of knots. However, there's a different sort of thing called, I believe it's not lift and coast, the pulse accelerating, which actually comes from real life driving. Anyone that owns not a Tesla, a Toyota Camry, a Prius, those sorts of style of cars, they do what's called this pulse accelerating. They accelerate. They want to use the optimum range of where the torque is within the engine curve, and that's, I think, what he was trying to do.
Well, Nick DeGroot's going to lead us back to green, as we're going to have a total of 69 laps, I do believe, to conclude this race here tonight at the Kentucky Speedway. Bronson Stafford lines up 2nd. Matt Wagner, Charles Teed, and Polo Hernandez complete the top 5. And I took the opportunity to kind of go over the last couple of races here at Kentucky. No surprise to see Charles Teed up here at the front, because back in Season 2, he finished 4th. Last year, he was runner-up to the eventual winner, Robert Maleska III. So he loves it here in the Bluegrass State.
Yeah, like I said, he's been phenomenal in terms of things, and now we're actually going to get to see. So Wagner and Stafford had to work together under that last green flag run to get their way all the way back up to the lead pack, right? Now Wagner and Bronson Stafford don't need to do that. They are the lead. They are right up there, and in actual fact, they're trying to gun it past Nick DeGroot here. Wagner's had some serious speed, I think, so far this race. Qualifying didn't really show it. If you actually have a look now, there's a potential for another 3 to 4 packs. There's 4 packs forming. And I tell you what, Polo Hernandez, backwards, including Maleska III, is in the 2nd pack. They're losing time. Somebody's got to get to the front of this pack and push them forward.
Teed, Schaus, Jim Brooks, and Benjamin Combs all in this group as well. 6 in this lead, or in the 2nd group, trying to chase down 3 in the front, as Matt Wagner goes to the point. Now, I talked about the good numbers that Charles Teed has had. Obviously, I don't want to jinx anybody, but Matt Wagner does not have good numbers here at Kentucky. He's actually yet to finish a race in his Dark Horse Racing Series career here, as he finished 25th back in Season 2 and 21st back in Season 3. Both his races have ended up on the tow hook.
Unfortunate for Matt Wagner. I mean, the guy's got skill. And again, I think he's another one of those that sort of sits in alongside sort of where Polo Hernandez's season's gone. The guy's definitely had pace. He's definitely had speed. He's had an option at some podiums and some really, really strong finishes. And I believe he actually ended up winning Indy at the end of last season as well. So the guy's definitely quick and knows how to drive these cars. It's just about those 5%ers. That's what he's doing wrong at this point in time. And if you run enough laps, we're running 120 laps, that's more than 100 laps, those 5%ers are going to come up. And that's where he's a little bit falling by the wayside. So that's where I want to see Matt Wagner start to perform.
Now, one thing that I'm going to ask you here, and this is just speculating that we might get this final pit stop under green flag conditions. So far, we've kind of gone 0 for 2, closing in on green flag pit stops, and a caution has come out. But we talk about not a whole lot in terms of strategy of coming in early and getting an advantage with fresh tires as opposed to another driver that you might be battling for a position. The one thing I got to wonder about in terms of strategy, though, that might make you think twice about coming to pit road earlier than others is the fact that, as we saw with Henry Bennett trying to get to pit road, he lost it. Came back out onto the racing surface, the caution came out. Last thing you want to do is come down pit road, lose that lap under yellow, have somebody spin back onto the racing surface and be trapped a lap down. So would that coax these drivers to try and run it just as far as they possibly can before absolutely having to make that final pit stop?
Yes, 100% so. And there's an additional reason for that, is that I think that what's going on through a lot of these drivers' minds as well is that the longer that they run, the more confirmed they are in terms of the fuel numbers that they need to put in the car. You've always got to think, right, how much fuel do I need to put in? How much do I think I need to put in? How hard do I need to run the car? These sorts of things. Whereas the later you come down, you know exactly the number of laps that you need to put in the car, exactly the amount of fuel that you're going to have when you get to the box. You know, there's no sort of questionable margins there. You know exactly the numbers. Yeah, I think the cautions, we've seen it, right? What were we saying? These cars are a lot more unstable, a lot harder to drive at the back end of these stints, and that's where the cautions are coming from. And ultimately, the risk versus the reward. The undercut, not all that strong here. Running out in clear air, you don't get that draft benefit. There's some option though, because if you're out in clear air, you can run your own lines. You can run as hard as you really need to. You can hit all the numbers that you're targeting. But the risk is that somebody else, you're relying on everyone making it to pit road safely, and I think that's too great a risk.
Update on the drivers that were involved in that most recent incident that eventually brought out the caution. Rick Ravon has worked his way back up into the top 10, currently running in 8th and going for another spot on Charles Teed. A little ways back behind them in another pack is Henry Bennett. He's in this 3-car pack with Jeff Heisong and Dylan Moskowitz. Right now, Bennett running in the 11th spot. So both of those drivers trying to get themselves back up here to the front, at least up into the lead pack where they were running before they ran into their issues. But right now, lead pack is just 3 cars. Stafford now out in front, Wagner in second, and Nick DeGroot in third. They got about 1.5 seconds before you get back to that group of 6 in pack number 2.
To note as well, if you actually have a look at the lead driver of that second pack, it's now Rick Ravon. So he's driven his way all the way through all of those cars, all the way up to the lead of that pack, and he's got enough pace to drive these guys forward. And now, if you actually keep your eyes on, now that Maleska can see that Ravon's made his way to the head of that pack, he's now going, okay, I gotta go. With those 10-15 laps, remember what I was talking about with Maleska? He wants to save for those first 10 to 15 laps of a run, then he starts to push the envelope. He knows that he's good on fuel, he knows the numbers that he's driving to, then he tries to drive everybody else off of those numbers. That's what's happening right now. The other thing that's happening is he's going, I need to catch up to this lead group. I really need to push this pace up a little bit. Ravon can do it for me. Let's go.
And they are actually starting to reel in that top 3. Last time by was about 1.2 seconds. It has now been cut down to just about a second flat from the front wing of Rick Ravon to the back bumper of Nick DeGroot in the 3rd position. And while these top 3 are running roughly mid to low, mostly low 2s, 25 2s, the number of guys back there in that second group are running in the 25-1 bracket, so they are reeling them in. As a matter of fact, I think Rick Ravon and Polo Hernandez may actually have caught the slipstream on the back of our top trio.
Yeah, and that's dangerous. This is a really dangerous period right now for both the lead pack, the middle pack that's trying to break away and catch back up to these leaders, as well as that second pack. If you actually have a look, Robert Maleska has not been able to maintain control. He's not been able to maintain contact with the rear end of Polo Hernandez. And now you can start to see it, is that Polo Hernandez and Rick Ravon, they've got the pace. Ravon has got it, and Hernandez is just sitting himself there. He says, I know if I sit here, I work with Rick Ravon, we're going to catch back up to these guys. I think Maleska's missed a trick here. And if he continues to let this happen, they're going to get further and further adrift until they don't get the option of using that draft effect from Hernandez and Ravon. And you can see he's immediately pushed his way to the 4 of this pack.
He has. They were running 3 wide in this pack just behind him as well, which is not going to help them in terms of their lap times and in terms of trying to close up the gap between themselves, the group of 2 up ahead, and of course the top 3. Bronson Stafford, who's showing the way here, has now led more laps tonight than he has led the entirety of this season. Coming into this race, he had only led 6 laps in the first 4 races here for his first full-time season, and he has led, obviously, much more than that so far here on this run. Wagner behind him with Nick DeGroot, and now only about maybe half a second back are Rick Ravon and Polo Hernandez. So I'd say maybe in the next 5 laps or so, we're going to have a group of 5 up here battling for the race lead. And, oh, by the way, if you're keeping track of the numbers of when that final pit stop might be coming up, we're looking roughly about 15 laps before we're going to start to see some of these guys ducking onto pit lane, potentially for the first time tonight under green flag conditions.
Yeah, and watch Maleska now. He's recognized. I need to go. I've saved enough fuel running behind these guys, and everything's happening up front. I'm not attached to it. I've got to get back up there. Remember what I was saying at the top of the piece as well. is that Maleska is phenomenal.
Oh, Maleska
Oh,
overcorrects it, and he collects up Eric Schaus as both cars go flipping and barrel rolling down the front straightaway, down towards the start-finish line.
oh, that did not just happen.
That thing just snapped to the right.
My word! What was I saying? He needed to push. You know what happens when you start pushing? It's those 1%ers. That starts to creep into your gameplay. You really start to push the car as hard and as fast as you possibly can, and he's over-pushed it!
I don't know what shocks me more, the velocity of the impact for him and the wild ride for him and Eric Schaus, or the fact that after all that, both machines are still under power and coasting back to pit road.
I am. If this was real life, they would not be. You would be. Those drivers would be in a medical van on their way back to the infield to get checked out. That is the power of sim racing. Something like that can happen. The guys will go back, they'll get a look at everything, and they'll be right to go.
My goodness, look at the shot he takes into that outside wall. Nowhere for Eric Schaus to be able to go.
Count the barrel rolls. Count the barrel rolls with me. I'm going to watch
My
it from Schaus's point.
Goodness. Now, after that last caution, Mike Teller had gotten one of his laps back. This caution puts the 97 back on the lead lap. So all 21 cars should be on the lead lap when we go back green here, dependent on how long Maleska and Schaus have to spend on pit road.
9, 10, 11, 12, 13...
Great job by everybody else there to be able to avoid both of these race cars, because when a car's flipping, you don't know what direction it's going to go. It could barrel roll up to the outside wall, it could barrel roll to the inside, the infield grass, and fortunately with this wide straightaway, everybody else was able to avoid, so it was just a two-car incident, but what a two-car incident it was.
I mean, start of the night so far. So I count 14 for Eric Schaus. I'm just going to go back and do the numbers on, these are important statistics to note, how many barrel rolls the car does. So 14 for Eric Schaus. Let's see how many Robert Maleska did.
And it looks like, fortunately, our onboard camera survived with Eric Schaus, as you just saw the back end of the 91 step out, and immediately the nose headed in the wrong direction, up into the outside wall, and with the speeds these guys are carrying into the corner, there's just no opportunity for Eric Schaus to be able to get on the brace or change his path. And he gets collected up with a wild ride as well. Both drivers have come down pit road. Both drivers have taken on their fast repair, and both are going to remain on the lead lap here for when we go back green. But this now will have Matt Wagner, the race leader, as he won the battle off pit road. Nick DeGroot, Bronson Stafford, Rick Ravon, and Polar Hernandez are going to be the top 5.
Yeah, so Wagner, I think, actually saved a bunch more fuel than the rest of those guys. That's why I actually see him at the 4 right now. Something I do want to note is that, look, I mean, if Robert Maleska is making mistakes, what does that say about everybody else? What that says is that this car, in these conditions, is very difficult to drive hard and fast for extended periods of time. And you've got a seasoned campaigner in Maleska. You've got a guy who knows this car back to front, 3 kinds of sideways, and apparently 5 barrel rolls as well. So that says to me, you've got probably one of the best guys who knows how to drive this thing cleanly without mistake, and we've seen that right throughout everything so far, is that Maleska has been that guy that when other guys are struggling, he's the guy to go to in terms of pace, and he makes a mistake. That says we've got a difficult race car to handle on our hands. So I actually want to say a big shout out to all the drivers so far that there has only been 3 cautions. That says a lot.
Only 3 cautions and only 5 drivers that are so far a fast repair in the hole. Rick Ravon,
Exactly.
Jimmy Drynan, Eric Schaus, Robert Maleska III, and Mike Teller. They're the only ones that have had to use the fast repair so far here tonight. I'll tell you what, I'll do you one better too, as far as the talent of Maleska having an issue there. We saw Henry Bennett have trouble trying to get onto pit road. He's the guy that puts together the setups for these drivers week after week in this league. So he even had some difficulty getting onto pit road.
Well, there's something to say there. I think he may have had broken suspension. I think he may have had a wheel off the ground. So there's a little bit more to it than that. So it's not just as plain and as simple as, hey, look, we got a driver, that puts the setups together and he's struggling to get the car in. I mean, Bennett's smarter than that. Bennett's a really, really good setup builder. I've driven a lot of these setups. They're actually, No, I'm gonna withhold that comment. They're actually doing a phenomenal job. It's just that the track and the draft and the conditions later on in the run are so sketchy that it's difficult. And again, they've done a phenomenal job up until now. Now we have a fuel race back on our hands. I think anyone that come down pit road on the last lap is best positioned. And guess who was the last one to do that? Mike Tellier.
Very interesting, because we're going to be going back green flag racing with 46 laps to go. Obviously, at this point, with the numbers we're given, nobody's going to be able to make it the rest of the way, but it does open up the options of when you might want to come to pit road to possibly top off that fuel tank and get those extra couple of laps that you may be short of the finish. Matt Wagner gets us back underway. You alluded to his Scott last season. Had a bookend year where he won the season opener at Michigan and followed it up with the win in the season finale at Indianapolis, chasing win number 1 here in season 4.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's just been one of those seasons for Wagner where he's really not been able to put together the cleanest of races. There's been mistakes in just about everything. He's really been trying his hardest, and there's been a couple of races where he's been phenomenal. You know, the guy has definitely, I think, performed to the top tier. He has been one of the better drivers in terms of overall pace, but again, it's consistency, and it comes down to making sure that you don't make mistakes like the one we just saw Robert Maleska make that allow you to make wins. So, look, I mean, you know, the guy's got a phenomenal position tonight, especially with Maleska the third at the tail end of the field with 46 laps to go. Anything could happen from here. Caution again!
Jimmy Drynan and Mike Tellier have run into issues off of turn 4.
And that'll be Tellier done. And Drynan done as well.
Both of these drivers had used their fast repair. Looks like Nicholas Winook, he is spinning onto pit road. I don't know if he was involved or if he maybe dove to pit lane to avoid the incident, but he right now is down on the pit lane. 4th caution of the night is going to come out here at Kentucky. Go back and see if we can find out what happened there on the exit of the final corner.
It looks, I was just having a look at it. It looks like Winook came up a touch, and Tellier came down a touch at the same time. So it's another one of those ones whereby the guys are sort of fighting for the same sort of little bit of real estate, and unfortunately make sideways contact, and that'll be Tellier's night done.
Man, and did you see how as soon as Jimmy Drynan's car made impact with the outside wall, it just shot the thing up into the air?
Yeah. And I mean, kills it as well, which is, you know...
Yeah.
But... yeah, the thing is toast. I mean, oh my word. Now, okay, now this changes things a little bit. For somebody like, I'm looking at Maleska. Who actually comes down pit road here? Do they all come down pit road or only partially come down pit road? If you're towards the tail end of the field, I think you got to come down. I think you got to take that top off. Yeah, you've been only under green for a full lap, but you've also been under caution for multiple laps. We're now on lap 78. You add 1 green flag lap in there, but you're also adding 5 to 6 laps worth of caution running as well, which is still eating up fuel. Yeah, not a lot, but it's enough fuel that I think Maleska all of a sudden becomes well positioned in this pack.
Yeah, Maleska decided to come down and top off. It looks like Henry Bennett has done the same. Eric Schaus, Gail Brooks, Jim Herrick, and Gary Corley. Bit of an extended stay on pit lane here for Maleska the third. Not sure what that's all about. His service has already been completed.
Could be just, yeah, he might just be sitting there. I don't know.
It looks like about 6 drivers took the opportunity to come down pit lane here and at least try and see if they can go a little bit further than the others that at this point have stayed out. I would say they probably could go maybe 3 or 4 laps further than Nick DeGroot, Matt Wagner, Bronson Stafford, and company. Nicholas Winook still sits on pit road. Tellier and Drynan still sit on pit lane. They're basically at the point right now where they're trying to see if they can get some manual damage repaired and at least get out there and maybe pick up a couple of spots. And as soon as I say that, they are now pushing Mike Tellier back to the garage area. Maleska has left pit road, so 18 cars are going to be running and on the lead lap, I do believe, when we go back green flag racing here.
I have a feeling Winook got a penalty for speeding on pit lane entry because he did cross into pit lane whilst moving at a significant rate of knots, so...
Maleska's back down again.
I think this is smart. This is Maleska saying, I'm already at the tail end of the field. I want to get this thing as topped off as possible.
Right. Now, one thing I was going to ask, and I'll still ask it here because he's going to be starting at the rear of the field here for this restart. He was at the back for the previous restart, and we saw what happened when he pushed it, where he ended up having the car come around on him and eventually had that barrel on the front straight with Eric Schaus. Now being back there in traffic and into the second half of this race, does he have to kind of pull back the reins here and be a little bit more methodic in how he works through the field, or does he run the risk of trying to push it again in order to make his way back up to the front?
I actually don't think he's going to push. Now, the reason for that is he's just pit. Lap 79, we're about to go back to green, right? So he is at 40 to 41 laps to be able to get home. I think he can do it, especially if he just backs his pace all the way down. That car is the most full of fuel of anyone that's out there. There's a couple cars right ahead of him that are close in terms of fuel. Jim Herrick, that he's just overtaken, is exactly the same strategy as Maleska III. He's pit under that last lap of caution. I think Maleska is targeting a no-stop race to the end.
See if that's going to be able to be possible. We may not have seen our last yellow flag as Matt Wagner went down there on the apron on the front straightaway. Now, one thing that I was not briefed about, we know that last week at Chicagoland, the drivers were not allowed to use the apron there on the front straightaway. They had to stay above the white line. I don't know if that was the case here tonight at Kentucky. And with Wagner dropping back, I'm not necessarily certain if he's having to give up spots or not. I haven't really seen anybody outside of Wagner venture down below that yellow line here on the front stretch.
I mean, it's interesting to note. It's one of those difficult ones where the track sort of just juts out a little bit, and it is just the natural line to just touch it. Towards the back end of the right now, I wouldn't be too concerned about it. But in the last 10 laps of the race, I would be concerned about it because, especially if you're right towards the pointy end of this field, you don't want to do anything that's going to give you that potential question mark. At the end of the race, if you know that you're good and somebody else isn't, at the end of the day, if you have to get down there to avoid another car, that's fine. You actually see Matthew Rodriguez at the tail end of the pack. He was on the apron on the front stretch. He was doing that to avoid a car, and he's rejoined, and he's lost a lot of time. So it hasn't benefited him in any way. That's perfectly fine. That's what we want to see.
Wow, they fanned out in the middle of this pack. 3 wide. I think they might have been 4 wide for a brief moment. Benjamin Combs was in the middle of that. Dylan Moskowitz had to run all the way up to the outside wall there through 3 and 4, and almost contact again there between the 4 and the 77. These guys back here from about 9th place back to 15th are racing it up, and right in the middle of this, you can see him there, center shot of your screen. That's Robert Maleska III in the middle of this storm.
He's not pushing, though. He is just using patience. He's watching the cars around him. We've got to remember, this is a guy that no longer has a fast repair. If something happens, if anything should happen, he has to avoid it at all costs. I think that's what he's doing. The other benefit is he's fuel saving. Currently, he is 4.5 seconds off the lead of the race, so not far, not enough for the extra pit stop that these guys are going to have to make to come into factor. Maleska is saving every single drop. I have a feeling that if we go green from here, Maleska may have this. If we get a caution, he's going to fight through all that all over again.
Well, Maleska last season, even with his 10 victories, he did have 3 DNFs in that season, in that schedule. This season so far, he does have 1 DNF. That was, of course, at Road America, and certainly wants to avoid DNF number 2 here this evening. We got a car in trouble back there. Jim Brooks in the 51. Things have really scattered up there. He ran into some problems. Everybody tried to get around as he was losing momentum. We were 3 wide there, a couple of rows deep, but they all managed to get around him as he drops back outside of the top 10, now to the 14th, 15th position.
Oh, he is really struggling. Oh, there's a car spinning! There's a car spinning! There's a caution! Then we're green to the end. We are green to the end, no matter what.
That's Gary Corley in the 7 who loops it around on the front straightaway and down towards the entrance of pit road. So Corley, who has had a rather quiet night back in around the 12th to 15th position most of the evening, is going to spin it and bring out the 5th caution of the night.
Well, okay, alright, this is curious. Now, if you're in the lead pack, I think you may not necessarily have to. Oh, it's close. You may have to come to pit road. You may be fine. You may get away with everything, right? So, look, there's going to be a couple different strategies, a couple different cars going in different directions as it stands right now. I think Maleska isn't going to pit. He gets himself a bunch of track position, and with the pacing laps, he may just be good on fuel. So remember, like I said, I think he was targeting getting to the end on fuel as it stood. So now you add another caution into it. I think he's good. I think he's perfectly good on fuel. The other cars are in this real big question mark bubble, and they were pushing so hard. So I think we're going to see a whole host of the lead group pit. I think you're going to see Maleska stay out. I think there's a couple other drivers that are going to stay out. Who was the other one that was down on pit road late? It was Jim Herrick. So I think Jim Herrick's another car that can stay out here as well.
And we were talking about Polo Hernandez and the problems.
Never mind. Don't listen to me.
Gale Brooks is going to stay out, it looks like here.
Herrick stayed out.
Jim Herrick, yep. And remember, he was, as you documented, he was also on the same strategy as Maleska. Had come down pit road at the 1 to green under the last caution. But Polo Hernandez, another tough break here tonight. This time, no fault of his own. Looks like he may have had some connection problems. He disappeared from our screen, has not returned back, and right now being scored 1 lap down the 18th position. So even if he does return back to the server, we're running low on laps and opportunities for him to be able to get enough lucky dogs to get back into contention. He was running at the time in the 9th position.
And he was again pushing another mini pack towards the front, so
So tough break there for Polo Hernandez. Looks like Gary Corley. Yes, he did. He did take on his faster pair there. And looks like the car that we were on board with, Eric Peterson, who we saw make a little bit of contact that eventually spun the 7 around. That little bit of nose damage did not affect him enough for him to take on his faster pairs, so he'll be restarting in the 11th position and still have the faster pair in the bank here for these final 30 laps. Gale Brooks was on pit lane 12 laps ago, Jim Herrick 11 laps ago, so obviously Gale Brooks is of the assumption that he could probably make it the rest of the way and maintain this track position. Herrick 1 lap better, but obviously, as you pointed out, everybody else that came to pit road, we're in the window now that they can make it the rest of the way. They can push 100%, not have to worry about saving fuel at all from this point on.
Well, there's a little bit of a problem for the two that are at the front that didn't pit this under this most recent caution. So Gale's going to get the best start. He's going to control the start. He jumps and then everyone else is reacting to him. So that's always going to push him out a little bit further. You get too far out, all of a sudden what happens is that everyone behind you in the draft builds up so much more momentum than you. By the time they catch up to you, they just fly on by. So he's then set up in the mid-pack. You're looking anywhere 3rd to 5th sort of thing, depending upon how the field sort of plays itself out. Given the drivers that are right there, I think it is going to be a top 5 once again that are going to break away a little bit. Nick de Groot's the last of the drivers that I think really stick to it. So his target will just stay with that lead group, right? So that's his target. And if he does that, he should be able to save definitely enough fuel to get home and be in with a contention. Now, cautions, obviously, the drivers are getting towards the latter stages of this race. So they're pushing a little bit harder for bits and pieces of positions, right? They're not just going to let things slide. At this stage of the race, you can't. Because it's all of a sudden you give up track position, you're going to have to take a few laps to get that position back, then you're fighting for it, you lose the ability to race the guys ahead of you, basically. So these guys are going to fight so much harder for position. That breeds more potential for caution. So we get another caution, there is all of a sudden that question mark over Gale Brooks and Jim Herrick turns into a solid tick in terms of fuel capacity. Personally, I think they're good. But if Maleska pit, that makes me a little bit more worried, because if there's anyone that knows whether or not you can make it, it's Robert Maleska.
Well, it's interesting strategy here on the part of Gale Brooks because Obviously was one of the drivers that did not elect to set down a qualifying lap, started subsequently back in the 19th position, now up here leading this race. But if you look back at the numbers here from the first 4 races, Gale Brooks is 5th in the overall standings, 2 top 5s, 4 top 10s. As a matter of fact, is only one of 3 drivers that has finished in the top 10 in all 4 races to start out this season. So being as consistent as he is, taking a little bit of a gamble here in terms of gaining track position, but possibly being short on fuel. But when you've got the momentum that he's got coming into this one, especially compared to where he was positioned in points at the end of last season, I kind of like this. Why not go for the risk?
Yeah, 100%. I agree. This is a very, very smart call. And like I said, the other guy that I thought was brilliant was because Maleska pit on the last lap of that last caution was Jim Herrick. I think what you're trying to do is you're trying to create a fuel overlap because you're already going to be at the tail end of the pack, right? So you may as well come down. What's the loss? You're going to lose, what, 1 position at the most? You may as well just come back down, grab a little bit more fuel. That's what those guys were doing under the last caution. As we go green this time, I'm so curious to see what happens to the pace of these front two.
Eric is going to lose about 3-4 car lengths to Gale Brooks heading into turn 1. Another 3 car lengths back to Rick Ravon, who then leads Matt Wagner and Nick DeGroot, your top 5. Bronson Stafford there as well.
Was that a no? Sorry, my apologies. My apologies. That was the green flag in the corner of my screen. I thought it was yellow. In fairness,
we got a slow car though. There was a slow car. Matthew Rodriguez is off the pace there in 1 and 2, and he actually does have the front wing gone. So no caution, but we definitely did have an incident.
Something is wrong. Something is massively wrong with that car. He's staying well clear of everybody else.
Side by side gonna be for 3rd place. Matt Wagner almost literally getting pushed by Nick DeGroot, by Rick Ravon. Bronson Stafford now joins this threesome, and he's going to make it a 4-car pack up at the front here. 3rd place back to 6th, trying to reel in the top 2.
So there's a couple things going on here. If I'm in this lead pack sort of group, I want to make sure that Jim Herrick and Gale Brooks, they have to push. I don't want to be pushing that air for them. The reason for that is I want them to have to sweat a little in terms of their fuel strategies. They go 3 wide just behind them.
Ooh, got close there with Rick Ravon and Matt Wagner a couple times there from 4 over here to turn 1. Still 3 wide going into the first corner. Wagner pushes up, and there definitely was contact that time.
That was wheel-to-wheel sideways, so both of them should be okay. There should be no issues there. The cars are built to withstand just the tiniest little bit of that because, a little bit of Robbins racing, but not much more than that. Anything more than that, and they both get damaged, and they start falling like rocks.
Wagner going to slot into 3rd, DeGroot into 4th, side by side for 5th. Gale Brooks was able to hold off a hard-charging Jim Herrick a couple of laps ago. Herrick, though, back to the inside again, looking for the top spot into 3.
And he's looking for that clean air down on the bottom. He doesn't want to follow Gale Brooks at all. And Wagner says, you know what, boys? I'm coming.
Oh, and Herrick's around. Jim Herrick has lost it off of 4. Rights the car coming back up towards the start-finish line. No caution going to come out for the spin by the 40 machine.
He's still going. And I tell you what, the car doesn't even look damaged. He's done a phenomenal job to keep that thing under control, but he's lost his shot. That is it. Herrick, gamble on fuel, did not pay off at all because he's still going to be able to drive that thing cleanly.
And Gale Brooks has lost the lead as well, dropping back to the 3rd position, just behind Bronson Stafford, just ahead of Nick DeGroot, but still in this lead pack, still with a shot of winning this race. Matthew Rodriguez has come down pit lane, lost 3 laps as a result. Gary Corley still sits on pit lane after his spin that brought out the latest caution. 4 laps down for that driver. So right now we've got 15 drivers on the lead lap, including Jim Herrick, who had that loop around, that are on the lead lap.
Just keeping my eyes as well. Maleska the third hasn't made a ton of time. He's hanging all the way off the back end of this chase group. He's not in contact with them. That's a major issue. Something in that restart phase has happened to Robert Maleska the third. This is a guy we thought might be winning this race, remember. He might have control of this race. He might be the guy to watch. All of a sudden, he's not even in the picture.
Well, that last time by, he ran as fast, if not a tick faster, than the race leader, Matt Wagner. But to your point, there's about, half a straightaway between him and the next car in front, 12th place Dylan Moskowitz.
Without another caution, he's not winning the race from there. So there's something wrong with his car or wrong with his pedals, or you know what? I think he's had a hardware malfunction. I think something has gone wrong, which is why we saw him for extended periods on pit road.
Could very well be right. He definitely had that lengthy pit stop, about a minute and a half in his pit box at one point, and it takes these drivers only roughly about anywhere from maybe 7.5 to 8.5 seconds for a 4-tire pit stop. So yeah, I think you're right. Something more sinister there, as we might have almost had a spin from the race lead. Matt Wagner almost got turned off the nose of Bronson Stafford. Rick Ravon going to take advantage of the fact that both of them had to bail out of the throttle just a little bit to gather their machines back up.
Stafford's going to push it to the outside. Wagner's on that inside. It's got preferential line on entry, but that momentum on the outside is stronger, and I tell you what, Stafford's pinching him. He does not want him to build up any momentum whatsoever.
It's a car up ahead as well that they are going to probably encounter soon.
It's Gary Corley.
Yes, it is. The lap machine of Gary Corley. Hopefully he'll be able to... Oh, fire save place out of the way! Stafford got the apron! He's going to loop it around out of turn 2. Everyone avoided him.
This is what Robert Maleska was praying for. He was absolutely praying for this.
The apron claims another victim as Stafford was leading this race, got those left sides a little too low below the yellow line, and then spent the entirety of the second corner trying to gather the thing back up. And it's incredible the fact that we didn't have 2 or 3 more drivers from that lead pack get collected up in this.
Yeah, look at that's not the first time that we've said that tonight either. You got to remember that, right? Like, these guys have been racing so close, so hard. He touches the slightest amount. He actually Oh no! Don't tell me Rick Ravon got into him.
He got a little bit of him, I think.
I just had to look back at it, and the last part that sent him around was Rick Ravon. Yeah, Rick Ravon's got a tiny crease. Yeah. Oh no! He popped back out. He got very lucky. Rick Ravon. I think Ravon's actually fine.
This almost looks similar. We'll take a look at it here, but this looks almost similar to contact. I don't think he made contact with the wing. I think he made contact with the right front wheel.
Oh, this is so difficult to figure out.
I don't think the wing made any contact. I think that his right front, talking about Rick Ravon, made contact with the left rear area of Bronson Stafford's machine, but I don't think sheet metal made any contact with the back of the 61.
Oh no, it was, oof.
Here's from the back of Bronson Stafford. Boy, that's so tough to tell.
His nose cone was damaged on my screen for about a second.
The contact was minimal. It looked very similar to what we had earlier when Eric Peterson made a slight bit of contact that eventually sent Gary Corley around on the front straightaway. Ravon has not come to, or actually he did come to pit road under this yellow, as did about 7-8 other drivers, but he did not spend any extra time on pit lane for damage repair. He's going to be the first car off of pit lane, restarting back in the 9th position. Others that came to pit road: Eric Peterson, Dylan Moskowitz, Jeff Heisong, Jim Brooks, Bronson Stafford, obviously after his spin, and Robert Maleska III was back on pit road as well.
Something's wrong with Maleska. Something has got to be wrong. I don't see any. He's been quick tonight. He got the pole. You know, he's been very, very quick tonight. I think something's wrong. Like, that's not a play that I would be expecting to see from him.
Now, I'm not 100% certain, but I think Jim Herrick, he did not pit under this caution. I think he did not pit at any point prior to the last caution. I think that right now what I'm seeing on my end is it scoring him on pit lane after he had that spin.
But I think he spun into
pit road entrance. Lane. Yeah, so I think it counted that he was on pit road 10 laps ago when in fact he actually did not take any service. So he, along with the 7 drivers ahead of him, stayed out under this yellow flag.
You know how I can tell that that's what happened? His pit lane transit time for me is showing as 0.8 of a second, and that's
there you go.
Yeah. So that's the confirmation there, I think. So
It's a big break for him, though, too, if you consider the fact that he had
Oh yeah.
lost a lot of ground with that spin out, managed to not hit anything, but was running up inside the top 5, second place at the time when he spun out. Now this puts him right back up in the thick of it again, 8th place here. He and Gale Brooks apparently have decided that the pit stops they made 29 laps ago was their last one of the day, because neither one came down pit road here under this caution period.
Well, we've had enough caution laps now that they've definitely saved enough fuel, so they're home and hosed. I wouldn't be too concerned about them whatsoever. So I think they've made a smart. I'm not necessarily going to say the smartest decision, but they've attempted. If you're going to win the race and you know that you don't have the pace, sometimes you just got to do something like this. Sometimes you got to throw, caution to the wind. Sometimes even when you do have pace, you've got to go with that alternative strategy. You've got to create a strong point over the other drivers in the field. You've got to create this offset. You've got to find something so that you can take it to them. And they've done a phenomenal job. They've actually done a really smart job because they've positioned themselves clear of a lot of the traffic. A lot of those incidents are happening towards the front of the field, but then it's flowing into the midfield. They're clear of a lot of that. They're not trying to dodge cars bouncing back and forth off the walls. So, look, they've done a phenomenal job, both Gale and Jim Herrick. And I expect them to continue to do well. Jim Herrick has gotten lucky, but he's played himself back into contention here again.
17 cars are going to take the green flag when we get back underway here momentarily with what will be a total of 12 laps to go here at
Isn't
Kentucky.
This spicy?
Oh boy. 15 of them are on the lead lap. Matthew Rodriguez got the free pass under this most recent caution. He is now 2 laps down. Gary Corley in 17th. 4 laps down. It's Matt Wagner leading Nick DeGroot, Gale Brooks, Eric Schaus, yep, the guy that we saw flipping down the front straightaway with Robert Maleska III around the halfway point of this race. He's up in 4th, and Charles Teed's going to be the top 5 as Matt Wagner gets ready to get back up through the gears and get us back underway here in the closing stages of tonight's race at Kentucky Speedway.
Yeah, you got to remember, Eric Schaus was upside down 14 times. Still an option at winning this race.
Wagner going to get a very decent start. 4 or 5 car lengths into turn 1. You got to make sure you don't get out too far in front, though. Otherwise, that group behind you will reel you in. You're going to be a sitting duck. They're going to race for 3rd place with Gale Brooks and Eric Schaus as Nick DeGroot tries to reel in the race leader. He's now closed it down to 2 car lengths off 4.
See if he can do that. I'm keeping my eyes on 2 cars in particular, Bronson Stafford and Robert Maleska III. Like we said, we thought that there was something wrong with Maleska. He's starting to show a turn of speed again, but he's only got 12 laps. He needs to make sure that he finishes this race, and there's been chaos lately, and there's no real groove for him to get by at the back there, and I think Bronson Stafford's just going to have to follow him through is the best possible thing that he can do.
DeGroot to the top, couldn't make it work there on the back straightaway. Ooh, makes a move here on the front stretch. Wagner throws a big block on him at the start-finish line. Eric Schaus might have the best seat in the house right now as he's going to jump up to the top side into turn 1 just in case a 3-wide move was available.
And have a look at who's coming after these guys now as well. It's Henry Bennett and Charles Teed and Rick Ravon. 3 drivers that if they can work together, I think they're faster than this lead group. I think they've got an option to win as well. So this one's not over from the second group's positioning.
I talked about Eric Schaus and the issues he's had here tonight. Rick Ravon and Henry Bennett have had their fair share of issues here this evening. Jim Herrick right there in this group also, and Benjamin Combs in that green and white machine. We've mentioned him a couple of times here this evening. He's been up in the top 10 consistently. Don't count him out. He could be someone that can make some late race moves.
I'm really interested to see if Ravon and Charles Teed and Bennett can get sorted, though. They seem to be contesting each other quite heavily right now. If they want to win this race, they can't do that. But the other thing is, there is only 6-7 laps to go in this race, so they need to fight for positions. Remember what I was talking about? It's going to take you a lap to get that position back. Well, Charles Teed's now got a huge slingshot. He'll sling down on the underside. They're compromising each other, though. They've got to be super careful here.
We were fanned out 4 different lanes back here in Group 3, if you will, with Maleska III, Moskowitz, Jim Brooks, Bronson Stafford, and Jeff Heisong. Right now, Maleska's worked his way up to 11th place, but a total of almost 3 seconds off the race leader, about nearly a whole back straightaway with 6.5 laps to go. DeGroot moves up, tries to get some dirty air to the nose of Matt Wagner off of turn 4, now defends the inside line. Wagner's going to take the top, headed for turn 1.
Look at these guys battling back and forth. They're sort of just I want to do this. I'm going to try something different here. They're really mixing it up. And the best part about that is when you're going into the last laps, you want to get to this point in the race and you want to have a really good read on what the other car's going to do. You know what they're going to try and do, and then you can sort of cover them off. Right now, they're changing things up a bit. They're changing how they're running. They're changing how they're taking the air off each other. They're changing where they're placing the car through the corners. Have a look at Schaus here. Schaus has got a huge run.
Gonna jump up there to the top side, see if it will work. Can't quite get to the right rear.
Rewind.
He is going to get to the right rear, actually. I thought he wasn't going to be able to, but he got a good run off of 2. Wagner now going to get clear onto Groot. He'll slap back into second. Schaus trying to stay alongside for the runner-up spot. He has to tuck back in line as well. And as these 4 have been racing it up, here comes 6 more contenders. Bennett, Teed, Ravon, Peterson, Herrick, and Combs.
Oh man, this race, went from a 4-way battle for the lead, and I think Gale Brooks is playing himself into contention here. I'm waiting for him to send it down the inside. Wagner's got to try and find a way past De Groot, because De Groot is just holding him up so fantastically. And now Ravon's here. Schaus is slipping back. Gale Brooks is there. Brooks has sent it through to second place.
Here comes Henry Bennett. So far this season, 3 victories
Here comes Ravon.
Yeah, he's going to jump to the inside here on Gale Brooks, and now he's going to jump to the top. Wagner trying to make a move. Right now, only 1 multi-time winner in the season. That's Maleska. Bennett's trying to be the second after he took the checkers at Road America. Brooks might have run a little too high. 4 wide. That's, I believe, Henry Bennett and Eric Schaus getting together.
Yeah, it was. It was 100%. You could just see it happening, though. Gale Brooks got all the way up on the top side, right on the high lane. He was trying to contest it. He went a little bit too deep into the corner, and then all of a sudden he checked up and started coming back down, right as every other car that was tailing them starts to drift up on that exit. They get on the power. The car wants to run higher along the racetrack as you start to do that, and it just caused chaos behind. Schaus had to check up, and Bennett wasn't aware of it.
Lot of damage there to the front of Henry Bennett. I think he got the worst of that exchange. The 72 of Schaus doesn't look all that bad, at least when we checked back on him there in the infield grass on the front straightaway. It was 2 to go when Nick de Groot hit the start-finish line, this time by under caution. I believe he's going to be seeing the white flag. So Nick de Groot, in his career here under Dark Horse Racing Series, is going to be 2 for 3 in victories at Kentucky Speedway, as white flag flies in the air, this time over the hood of the 89.
Wow. We got ourselves the first green-white caution. Oh, that is so rough for Henry Bennett. Nothing he could have done at all. Unfortunate for him. He's, again, another one of these drivers that showed pace and just found not a lot of luck. It's disappointing. It's a tough night for multiple drivers in the field. Multiple drivers have put themselves in different positions at different stages throughout the night. Look at Maleska. Look at Stafford. These guys have been towards the front in terms of their championship hopes. Look at the guys that are normally a little bit further back in terms of the pack, and they've played themselves up. All of a sudden, Nick de Groot, he's got an option to win here. There's multiple bits and pieces that are going on.
Nick de Groot looking for his first win on the season. Rick Ravon able to battle back up for second. Matt Wagner there in third. Gale Brooks, the strategy worked out in terms of maintaining track position. Looks like he may be going for his 5th straight top 10 finish and 3rd top 5 on the year. And Eric Peterson popping up here into the top 5 in the closing stages of this race.
Yeah, what a race. It's been phenomenal. I mean, it's had it all. It's had multiple cautions. It's had multiple green flag runs. It's had, great racing for the lead. It's had great mid-pack racing. It's had packs that have broken away and caught back up to the leaders. It's had a little bit of everything, and it's been a phenomenal night out here.
Nick de Groot, back in Season 2, picked up the victory here at Kentucky. 2 seasons later, he's in victory lane once again as he's going to take the checkered flag here tonight at the Kentucky Speedway. First win of Season 4, and he's going to gain quite a bit of spots in the point stands as well, with 6th in points, 71 points back coming into this race, with Maleska and Bennett both running into some issues. Maleska finishing back in 9th, and and Steph, good point. Stafford back in 13th and Bennett back in 14th. De Groot is going to gain a lot of points heading into next week.
Unfortunate for Gale Brooks. I mean, the guy was so close to a third place finish here tonight. He ran a phenomenal race. That strategy call was fantastic by him. He did a great job. Unfortunately, he is the guy that's going to cause that wreck. I mean, he checks up in 3 and 4. He was running so close to the wall. He was trying his best to maintain that momentum as much as he possibly could and still get the car to turn. Rick Ravon, I actually feel the saddest for Rick Ravon. Look at the run he had towards the tail end of tonight. You know, I think if you have a look, if there's one more lap, they go one more lap, Ravon wins this thing. But at the same time, I'm not upset for Nick DeGroot because that was him last week. He was the guy that I think had the best car and was most likely to win the race. He gets caught up in something. Yeah, he created a little bit. Yeah, he was a little bit too aggressive. That's racing, though. You deal with that, you move on. And the thing that I think he's done really, really well from tonight is that he's controlled things from the front. He's done a phenomenal job for that. I'm really proud of Matt Wagner as well. Another driver that has been there and just gotten unlucky multiple times this season. Finally gets to check off that podium. He's done a phenomenal job to get here and be on that podium tonight, and I think he deserves this one as well.
I'm completely on board with you in terms of the point you made there with Nick DeGroot, that as soon as he got to the front, he was able to control things behind him, was able to determine who got to run where, knew when to jump down to that inside line to play defense, to not allow somebody to take the shorter way around the racetrack from him. Obviously, not quite to the extent of the dominance he had back in Season 2, where he led 118 of the 120 laps, but certainly kept that 89 machine out in front for a good portion of this race. We'll show you the finishing results in a moment, but we do have to now take the opportunity to go back, take a look at that last incident that brought out this final caution of the day. And you gotta feel heartbreak here for these two guys in Bennett and Schaus, because these are two guys that had to overcome early adversity. Schaus with the barrel roll, Bennett with spinning, trying to come onto pit lane. Both had to work their way back up to the front, and they were up in that lead group with a shot of winning this race as well.
Yeah, they played themselves back in terms of contention. I mean, you've got to say that I think Bennett's best chance was attach himself to Rick Ravon, everything he needed to. But look at Eric Schaus, like the guy really ran in the tail end of that race towards the front. He was in that lead group. He did a phenomenal job, I think, tonight. And I think what this race has actually shown me is that we've actually got. Look, you can sit down and you can say, yeah, Maleska's dominated. You can say Nick DeGroot. You can say Rick Ravon. All these guys have had phenomenal seasons so far. But having said that, look at the quality of the mid-pack. We have Gale Brooks that's played himself into contention here. Eric Schaus has had a phenomenal race. These are the sort of guys that have very quiet races normally, and they go, oh yeah, I'm going to take away a nice consistent top 5, top 10. They're grabbing points week by week. All of a sudden, something happens like it has tonight multiple times. They play themselves into things in terms of strategy. They get to show their wares. They get to show how good of a driver. This race was fantastic because I got to see so much more of what the midfield has to offer.
And with that, just take a look at how that can definitely change what the point stands in the championship picture looks like, because you've got guys like Maleska, Bennett, and Stafford, who were first, second, and fourth in the points coming to this race. They're going to lose some ground to guys like Rick Ravon, Gale Brooks, Nick DeGroot, and Matt Wagner, who were third, fifth, sixth, and seventh in points coming to this race. It's going to make the points a lot closer, I think, amongst those 7 drivers who, even coming into tonight, were only separated by 75 points.
Rick Ravon, consecutive podiums. He's the only driver that I think was on the podium last week that's making
right.
a repeat visit. So all of a sudden he's starting to piece his season together, and have a look at how his race went tonight as well. Here's a guy that got himself mired in the mid-pack multiple times. Every single time he did that, he grabbed 1 or 2 other guys and drove them up to the lead pack. Every single time. Next week, I'm attaching myself to Rick Ravon. I do not want to leave his side. I want to follow him. I want to learn what he's doing. I want to do whatever he's doing, because that is the guy that if I'm going to win the race, I need to follow him.
Now, do you want to do that when you're going to a road course like Watkins Glen next week?
Okay, never mind.
Next Speedway. Let's clarify. Next Speedway is where you want to do it, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Now, obviously, another thing that is kind of an interesting factor here is I mentioned with Gale Brooks, only 4 drivers came into this race with 4 straight top 10 finishes in the first 4 events. we're now down to 2 drivers that are going to be heading to Watkins Glen with 5 straight top 10 finishes, Rick Ravon and Gale Brooks. With Henry Bennett finishing down in 14th, he now has his first finish outside of the top 10 here this season. So obviously, as we know, in these type of series, when it's IndyCar related, consistency is rewarded, and usually it's that consistent driver that's going to win you the championship. So keep an eye on some of these guys that are keeping these streaks going of good consistent finishes up inside of the top 5 as well as the top 10. Looks like I'm trying to see if we've got any of our podium finishes here on standby, and at this point in time, looks like we do. Let's see if we can talk with third place finisher here tonight. His first finish at Kentucky, by the way, in his Dark Horse Racing Series career here with the Indy Cars, and that is Matt Wagner. Hey, Matt, it's Scott and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
Yeah, I guess you're loud and clear.
Man, obviously a great performance for you here tonight. Really solid outing, spent some good time out in the race lead, had a shot there to maybe be able to get the race win in the closing stages, but we saw that obviously the 89 was going to take that inside line on the front straightaway especially, and also on the back straightaway. What little more did you need to be able to get alongside him, be able to complete that pass off the corner of either 2 or 4?
Probably a bigger gap, and I was looking at my relative and an ever-closing Rick Ravon. It was hard to make that call, but every time I would try to get behind Nick, I would get so airtight. I would just push up, and I would have to let off, and that kills my run.
I tell you what, I mean, what an interesting race. You had to work with multiple drivers through multiple periods tonight, and then at the end, all of those drivers changed. We saw you work with Bronson Stafford. Stafford just was very willing to accept letting you lead so you could get back up to the lead pack. I think that happened twice in 2 different runs whereby he's both got attached to different packs and then you sort of work together at the front of the pack to get back up to the lead. Tonight really showcased pairs of drivers that are working forwards. Are you going to reach out to Stafford? Are you going to reach out to potentially Rick Ravon to work with him when those sorts of situations come up again in the future?
Yeah, I'm glad he was really willing to work with me. Not many drivers have that kind of patience, but I really appreciate them. Let them follow me, and I knew it was fast enough to catch up to him. All he had to do was just stay with my draft, and we were able to catch lead pack. And 10 laps later, here we are, right attached to the leaders. And I said, here you go. You can do whatever you want. Pass me, whatever. Because I was chilling and letting the race go by, and just that's what I was doing at the start, saving fuel, staying out of trouble.
And one of the big top stories we talked about coming into tonight's race, as we have at most of the speedways, is the fact that we know that when you guys get closer to the end of a fuel run, the back end of the car gets lighter and really wants to spin coming off of the corner. And we saw a number of contenders get involved in wrecks that was kind of the deciding factor into causing the car either spin out or trying to save the car and counter steering into the wall. Was there a point where consistently you were able to know that that was when you were going to feel the sensation in the car, or did you just have to be aware of it the whole time?
You have to be aware at all times. There's a certain fuel number I was looking at. I really think it had to do with the weight of the car, because right about 5 gallons of fuel left, the car wanted to step out ever so slightly, so you have to manage your corner exhaust of 3 and 4. And I was able to do that the whole race, and I was really happy I didn't spin it. It was pretty difficult. I saw some drivers out there that were pretty out of control, and I feel bad for Bronson, who was leading, and he touched the apron so slightly out of turn 1, and he lost the car, and I felt bad for him right there.
Well, Matt, still a great run for you here tonight. You were 7th in the points coming into this race, and definitely going to gain an awful lot of ground here as well heading into Watkins Glen. Not only that, but really cool to be able to see you finish the race out with a good run. Kentucky has not exactly been the kindest to you in the past couple of seasons, so congrats on a 3rd place run here this evening. We're now going to give the opportunity to thank some sponsors and do some shout-outs.
Actually, that run there, that was good medicine. That was really good healing. But anyway, I'd like to thank all my sponsors: LMC Gear, Area 51. Uh, God, gosh, uh, what a great run tonight! Feels pretty good. Extra medicine, and then we going on to Watkins Glen. Uh, Congrats to Nick on the win. Really good drive. You guys are awesome in your broadcasts, and I really do appreciate all your research. It's really good. Uh, we'll check you next time.
Absolutely. That's Matt Wagner, P3, here tonight in the Bluegrass State. Best of luck to you next week at Watkins Glen.
Yeah, buddy.
Let's see if we can get our second place finisher here tonight. Started this race from outside of the top 10, brings it home in second place. Rick Ravon. Hey Rick, it's Scott and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
I got you. How you doing, Scott and Seth?
Man, what a start you've been on to this season. 5 races and not a finish outside of the top 6. That also includes road courses, 2-mile tracks, back-to-back mile-and-a-halfs. Here tonight, though, Scott was mentioning about the fact that if we had run that final lap under green flag conditions, you probably would have had something there for the 89. Is that the case?
Oh, of course it's the case. I mean, I knew that those guys were on old tires when they didn't pit and I did, and I knew I think there was 13 laps to go. I said, you know what? I have plenty of time to run these guys down, and it's really not going to be too hard because it was really sticking in 3 and 4. 3 and 4 was the tighter of the corners. If you could get through 3 and 4 flat, you can make up a bunch of time on those guys. And I knew that going into the final laps. And I saw that Nick is leading, and Nick is so dang good. But he, his tires were so much older than mine. I just knew even if he went down to the inside and tried to maintain that speed, take the short way around, I could have just blasted by him up top. I was sure. I was so sad to see that yellow flag come out.
I mean, we were talking about it just in the booth here as well, Rick, is that pretty much every single time you got mired back in traffic, it was take a breather the first couple laps, get the tires up to temperature, get comfortable with the grip levels again, push your way through to the front. Like, every single time. And we were talking to Matt Wagner, it takes a little bit of patience, it takes the right driving buddies. I think you did it 3-4 times tonight, whereby you pushed your way through back up to that lead group. Every single time you had a different partnering buddy that was working with you and allowing you to do what you needed to do to get back there, and they just let it happen. How important is that in terms of this league that you can say, hey, Paulo Hernandez did it with me, hey, Henry Bennett did with me, all of these sorts of guys. Are you going to reach out to them? Are you going to keep trying to work with them? Are you going to keep building that positive relationship? And how important is that to your driving?
Well, the only way to work on a positive relationship that I know of in this league up to this point is just to race these guys clean. Because they all race hard and they all race clean from what I've seen. I haven't had a problem with anybody out there yet. I wasn't really trying to, there's a couple times somebody stayed with me rather than try to pass me. And I said, look, we got to catch these guys. And so we got to stop fighting each other. And then when they stayed behind me, we were able to work our way back up to the lead pack. So maybe that's what you meant, but I did get together. I want to mention Henry Bennett. I felt bad about that, but I didn't expect Henry to breathe it going into one because you could take that turn flat out. And I was sort of setting up for maybe a pass on the backstretch, see how that played out. And then he checked up like I think 3 or 4 miles an hour, and I was so close to him, I just couldn't avoid him. I feel bad for that because Henry is such a darn good driver, and he had a real shot to win this thing. If that didn't happen, that mired him in the back of the pack, and I feel bad about that. So just want to say sorry, Henry.
Well, that kind of leads into the next question I was going to ask you, Rick, because as we know, with that contact, we saw you get up into the outside wall, had to come to pit road, take on that faster pair probably a lot sooner than you were wanting to. Does that in any way change up your strategy for the rest of the race, or does that not deviate the plan at all?
Well, something like that happens and you have it in the back of your mind, this is it. No more fast repairs. You kind of have to play it a little different. But if I played it different, I don't think there's any way I would have been able to run back up to the front. So, we're racing for wins. That's why we're here. The Gould Charge was just so hooked up. I'll tell you what. I mean, this car, I could put it anywhere, and I could just work my way through the field. It was beautiful. If ever there was a race that maybe I could say maybe I should have won, it was tonight because I felt like we had the field covered. We could go low, we could go high. We were fast everywhere. It was beautiful. It was wonderful. I love this. I love Dark Horse.
Well, with your
My,
consistency. Oh, good.
I was just going to say, just one more quick question just before we leave you. Next week is Watkins Glen. I mean, this is the road course of road courses if you're an American racer. How prepared are you for the next road course? I mean, it wasn't the cleanest run at the last one at Road America, but Watkins Glen's a completely different style of course.
Well, Watkins Glen is a real good track for us, so I'm hoping that we have something for those aliens up front. Who is it, Maleska and I think Bennett? If I'm remembering it right, I'm still kind of new to this league, so I'm trying to remember who the fast guys were on the road course. I think I got it right. And Hernandez, Polo, yeah, that guy, those three are they're like gone, you know. But the Watkins Glen track, we're pretty good at. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to put the Gould Charge up there with them and stay with them, and maybe we'll have something for them at some point. But only time will tell. Looking forward to next week.
Well, so far here in the first 5 races, you're leading in the statistics of top 5s. You're tied for the lead in the statistics of top 10. We'll see if maybe you can put a 1 in the win column next week at Watkins Glen. Before we let you go, Rick, we're going to turn the mic over to let you do some thank you sponsors and shout-outs.
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank the Lord. I love you, Jesus. Thank you for the life you've given me. Thank you for putting me in this league with these awesome sim racers. So much fun, such a challenge, and I'm grateful to be here. I want to thank the league owners at Dark Horse. Just thank you for putting this together, and I want to thank you guys in the booth. You guys are phenomenal. Every time we have a race, I go back and watch it later or the next day, and it's just thrilling. You guys, you're so knowledgeable. I mean, I don't know which one of you, if it's Seth or what's the other guy's name?
Todd.
Todd?
I'm right here. Todd? Oh, I give up. I'm done. I'm done. I'm out.
I mean, he talks and talks and talks and talks about the way the car is set up, the track temperature, how the tires are going to wear, the fuel mileage. He just knows his stuff, and he just goes on and on and on about it. And I'm like, wow, he really does know what he's talking about. He'll call, oh, this guy's doing this. He's probably thinking that right now. And he's said a couple things about me. I'm like, you know what? I went back and watched the replay. I'm thinking, that's exactly what I was thinking. How does he do it, man? You guys are just so entertaining. I love it. So thanks to you guys here for putting on a great show as far as the broadcast is concerned every week. I love it. I'm loving this.
Well, don't worry, Rick, because Scott answers to anything. Anything you call him, he'll respond.
That Aussie guy.
That Aussie guy, yeah.
Well, you replied so quick and short. I thought he said Todd. I guess he said Scott. Okay. I'll remember that next time. My apologies.
Rick loves me. And he can't get my name right. I'm done.
Don't worry. I'll get it right from now on.
I love you, man. It's so good.
All right, well, Rick, we'll let you go, but congrats on a great performance here tonight in Kentucky. Would have been cool to see if we'd have had that last lap under green, see what kind of a race you'd have made out of it there for the checkered flag, but good, consistent run tonight. You've been the most consistent driver here in the first 5 races, no doubt about that, and best of luck next week at Watkins Glen.
Yeah, thanks very much. We just came up 1 lap short, but maybe we could pull it off at Watkins Glen. I also want to say thanks to everybody who's out there watching, and God bless you. Thank you so much.
That's Rick Ravon, P2 here tonight at Kentucky. Coming up just short on beating the guy that we're about to go down to victory lane and talk to now, the Season 2 Dark Horse Racing Series champion, Nick DeGroot. Hey, Nick, it's Scott and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
Yeah, I got you.
All right, man. Well, you finally got that first win of the season off your chest. Strong run here tonight at Kentucky. We already talked about the numbers for you coming into tonight. Back-to-back top 5s, 5th place last year, and then, of course, the 118 of 120 laps-led domination back in Season 2, but had to work for a little bit more here tonight, but it still looked like that car was able to get up to the front and stay there no matter where you restarted.
Yeah, I don't think we ever dropped outside the top 5, so I really didn't have to deal with traffic at all, which is probably a good thing because it looked like it got pretty tough if you ended up back there. But yeah, after what happened last week at Chicagoland, leading the most laps there and then ending up in the fence while going for the lead on my own mistake, I should add, it's good to come back here and just, I think, lead the most laps again and just get it done, get the win. And it's good to be able to put that behind me.
Well, I tell you what, I think Rick Ravon had something for Look, I went out on a limb. I said, look, I mean, Rick Ravon, he was definitely moving quickly. He was hunting you down there towards the end. I think you deserved the win last week, and you got it tonight. Do you think that Rick Ravon's going to get it next week? Because he deserved it tonight. I think he had one of the quickest cars out there.
Well, I don't know. Next week's a road course, so that's a whole
Oh,
other
yeah, never mind.
territory.
Next oval. Next oval.
Oh yeah, he is he's very aggressive, and that just does him so good in races like this when the pack is all together, and you have to be aggressive because if you try to run 90%, you're getting freight trained. You're going back. People are going to be passing you on every side, so you kind of have to be at a 10 out of 10 the whole thing. And if that thing went green, it was going to be very difficult to hold him off in those fresh tires. I did not expect anyone who pitted with those pitted to get tires on the last caution to come back up through the field and catch the leaders, but they did. And Rick got up to second. I think Eric got into the top 5. So yeah, that caution definitely saved me one hell of a fight that last lap.
Now, obviously, with this race win, a lot of other drivers behind you are up there inside the top 7 in the points. And if we look at the guys that are 3 of the top 4 inside, 3 of the top 4 and then 4 of the top 7, had good runs and bad runs. It's looking like what was 75 points separating the top 7 is going to be really condensed down even closer when we go into next week's race at Watkins Glen. Now, obviously, there are drivers that take to road courses, that's their specialty, and then there's others that, they know about a road course, but Watkins Glen is like that one universal road course that just about everybody knows how to drive. So how much more pressure do you think it is on not only just yourself, but a lot of the other guys around you in the point standings battling for that points lead next week?
Yeah, absolutely. With guys like Rob and Henry, you can't afford to just be okay at road courses, and that's basically me. I can run about 5th to 7th on road courses, and which is admirable. It's not bad at all, but I need to step that up if I want to be able to battle these guys for the championship. And thankfully, Watkins Glen is like my favorite road course. It's my home track. I'm New York born and raised, so it's a road course I know well. I have a lot of official ones there and some interesting cars, one in an Indy car too. So I'm excited for that one. I think we could eke out a top 5. And points wise, I looked at the points every race last year. I was counting them. How many points did I cost myself with this mistake? How many did I lose? How many do I need? And this season, I don't want to do that. So this season, I'm just every race finish as high as possible, and the points will end up where they end up. So I think we did pretty well on that front today. So looking forward to Watkins Glen.
Ooh, making it real tough for me not to be biased next week, trying to not root for a fellow New Yorker at Watkins Glen next week. But man, Nick, obviously, congratulations on a great run here tonight. Very strong performance as you're trying to be a 2-time champion here in the Dark Horse Racing Series. We're now going to turn the mic over to you for some victory lane. Thank you, sponsors, and shout-outs.
Yeah, as always, Factory Back Motorsports, Covey Moore, who unfortunately could not be here tonight, but he got a win as a team owner, so I'm sure he's going to be happy when he sees that. So CoveyMoore.com, Cowboy Shit, all these other sponsors we have in the car. And, speaking of which, I should give a shout-out to Henry because that guy, he is such a solid, clean racer. And every time he was just trying to run his race, he ended up getting swept up in somebody else's thing, which is really unfortunate. He had a nice comeback there from that earlier incident, was going to get a top 5 and got wiped out in that last wreck. So he's somebody you're going to want to watch next week because I think with him on our team, we could definitely go back-to-back at Watkins Glen. He's one hell of a road racer.
Well, Nick DeGroot picks up his first win on the season, his second win of his career here in the Dark Horse Racing Series at the Kentucky Speedway, and he'll look to carry that momentum into the second road course stop on the schedule, Watkins Glen, next week. Best of luck to you, Nick. Congrats on a great performance here tonight.
Thanks, guys. It was fun.
Damn it, I wanted to ask him what my name was.
We should just have a running tally, have everybody moved in here, find out if they know what your name is.
I'm gonna have that out with Rick next week. I tell you what. Oh man, what a fun night, Seth! What a fun night because we got to joke with the drivers afterwards. But the racing itself was fantastic. Like that's what I'm enjoying about this league. Again, I'm gonna go back to it. The midfield showed their stuff tonight, and they showed their stuff to a phenomenal level. I really want to shout out. Unfortunately, we didn't get to chat to Gail Brooks or Jim Herrick, but both of those guys ran phenomenal races. Eric Schaus was there as well. There were so many guys tonight that really showed they can take it to the best of them. Maleska, where does he finish? Tail end of the field, back of the mid pack. That is such a big vote of confidence for how good this league has gotten.
No doubt about it. And the thing is, too, I think we're going to get the tale of two tracks based off of our first two road courses this season. Last time out at Road America, things got really spread out. I think we're going to have a lot more battles going on through the field when we get to Watkins Glen, because you pointed out as well, the fact everybody knows how to run Watkins Glen. Everybody has a general idea of how to run Watkins Glen. And so you're going to have those that are going to be better than others, but I do think you're going to have a lot more racing, a lot more battling for position when we end up getting to Watkins Glen, upstate New York next week.
I would wholeheartedly agree with that. I mean, everyone's closer. The issue with Watkins Glen is it's a little bit harsher on potentially bending bits and pieces of the front wings, so the front wings are so low to the ground. So that's certainly something you've got to watch out for. The drivers will have to take slightly different lines to what you'll see other cars take at Watkins Glen. So, little variances, and it's whether or not the drivers adapt to those appropriately.
It's going to be interesting, too, because if we kind of base it off of last season, last year's Watkins Glen race turned into a fuel strategy race. One driver that would like to forget about that was Eric Schaus. He came up about 6 laps short of making it to the finish, but we ended up seeing a great battle between Alexander Van de Sant and Robert Maleska III, and Van de Sant got his first win of the season there at Watkins Glen. So, whether it be a fuel strategy race or whether it be just an all-out who's got the best car, based off of past performances of Watkins Glen on the schedule, we're in for a heck of a road course race next week.
I mean, I always love it when I'm one of these guys that really, really loves it when the drivers not only have to show their skill, but they have to show the ability to adapt to the circumstances that are presented to them. And I think whenever you end up with a fuel race, the drivers really have to think on their feet. I've heard drivers complain about how difficult it is to manage a fuel, and they just want to go flat out. But really, that's not what it's about as a driver. You have to be prepared. You have to have done your practice. You have to have done your homework. You have to have done your numbers. You need to know how to lift and coast. You need to know where to fuel save, when to fuel save, and why. And the drivers that do that homework get rewarded at these sorts of races.
Well, next week we are guaranteed a brand new winner at Watkins Glen as well here under the Dark Horse Racing Series banner, as back-to-back seasons 2 and 3, it was Alex Van de Sant going to victory lane, and he's yet to make a start here in season 4. So we'll be seeing a new driver celebrating in the Watkins Glen victory lane more than likely next week. But as you point out, Scott, fun race here tonight, very entertaining. Double wide, 3 wide, on occasion 4 wide, and most of the time they were able to keep it together too. So a lot of heart-stopping moments, but Nick DeGroot able to pick up his first victory of the season here tonight at Kentucky Speedway. Going to be a lot of fun to see how close the points are heading into Watkins Glen next week. We'll have the call for you here next Wednesday night with the green flag flying at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Scott, appreciate you joining me up here in the booth for this one here tonight, though, at Kentucky.
I mean, again, look, the drivers made such an entertaining race. I'll join. I'm here for that. And of course, we're at road courses next week. This is my bread and butter, baby.
Absolutely. Well, thanks to everybody that tuned into our coverage here tonight. Hope you guys enjoyed it. For Scott Rankin, I'm Seth Cole. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday night as you've been watching another broadcast courtesy of the Flatout Racing Network.
This broadcast is the copyrighted work of Flatout Racing Network and may not be rebroadcast, retranslated, or used in any form without the express written consent of Flatout Racing Network and iRacing.com Motorsports Simulations. Flatout Racing Network would like to thank you for your support, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's broadcast.